Thanks for joining us. Okay, let's talk about Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket. Now, we talk a lot about SpaceX because they are constantly flying, and at this point they're launching rockets almost every other day, and we would love to talk about other people as well. So to be able to talk about a big next step for Blue Origin is exciting. I really would love to see more and more content from Blue Origin, and I always ask for it, and I want to give flowers to Dave Limp. He's the Blue Origin chief executive, and they're showcasing this new rocket. They're showcasing the tests. We want to see the development of the rocket. I know there's a lot of benefit to a kind of cloak and dagger approach of, and it's completely historic in the space industry. Many large rocket companies do a lot of their development behind closed doors. A lot of engineering companies do all of their development behind closed doors. But there's something specifically American space industry-esque that is showing the development, and the early NASA days did that. We have footage from all the way back then. We think people like Walter Cronkite that were talking about it at that time and building content and teaching people the complexity, finding the story behind the complexity of going to space. So I, as someone who is constantly storytelling about space, I want to see more from Blue Origin. We want to see their story. We want to see the people behind it. SpaceX does a really good job of it, and so I want to give huge kudos to Dave Limp for posting this. So the New Glenn rocket is their Falcon Heavy, and New Glenn is what is going to bring them to space and really send things out to space. Their New Shepard rocket is fantastic for Kármán line jumps to the edge of space, right? And they're sending humans. They're doing humans with that. And more importantly, they're doing that on Blue Origin engine technology, right? The BE-4 engines. Now, the BE-4 engines are also powering New Glenn. So, the first maiden launch of any rocket is really where you figure out how good was the theoretical engineering, because so many things can go wrong in a rocket launch. But Blue Origin this is part of their advantage by the entire architecture of their rocket technology being based off of the same engines. It allows them to get to the launch pad for a maiden launch of a heavy lift rocket with a ton of data on how those rockets perform, because a lot of the time that maiden launch is really the first time that you're getting real data and feedback and not a simulation on going to space, and that's where things go wrong. Now, SpaceX's Falcon 9 is built off that same concept, right? The Falcon Heavy is built with 3 Falcon 9s, the center core, and then the 2 side boosters, but it's all Falcon 9 technology. And so we have seen that be very successful before with SpaceX, and I know with the new direction of Blue Origin, and personally knowing, whether just from afar from following them on LinkedIn or online, but I know there's a lot of folks who have gone to Blue Origin recently. There's been a lot of new hires of a lot of really smart people. I've been able to speak with a few people over there as well, and just get to know them, and it seems like they have a lot of really good people. They just approach it in a totally different way, and there's a lot of things to be really excited about here. So the fairing for the New Glenn rocket is larger than what is the standard for fairings, which is a 5-meter fairing. And that is where the payload, the thing going to space, sits. And so the big limiting factor for sending things into space is the amount of size and weight lift capability you have for that rocket. And the payload, you might be able to get to the right mass, but if it doesn't physically fit, like James Webb Space Telescope needed to be folded like origami just to get to space. And, it's all about what fits inside that fairing. So having a 2-meter larger fairing, so having a 7-meter fairing, 23 feet in diameter, allows you to open up a whole bunch. New Glenn will launch from Launch Complex 36 and out of Florida. and we're really looking forward to that. We love seeing that blue methane flame out of those engines. And another thing that I'm really loving that seems to be just this whole dynamic of private versus public/government launch operations is we've seen SpaceX be a little bit more aggressive on being prepared before any kind of federal clearance for a launch, right? We saw that with Starship, where they ran into issues where the FAA process was a lot longer than what SpaceX could reproduce to get ready for the next launch. And so they would put the rocket on the pad and publicly say, hey, we're ready, which then put pressure on the FAA to get that clearance and to make sure basically that every step is being taken and there aren't any waste, right? It didn't have to take a long time. Now, I love that Blue Origin is doing the same thing. They're doing it in their own way, right? Dave Lim posting, they're ready, putting the rocket on the launch pad, showing it's there. These are good things. That is part of the balance that I think if we're going to get to space progress and advance to a next level, this kind of pushback and a little bit of friction on the process is going to be needed. If we're getting to this point where private space is going to be a main part of the vehicle of us getting to space, right? Between Blue Origin and Rocket Lab and SpaceX and ULA, there's a lot of different companies, and the rocket launches with reusable rockets will increase. And so the process needs to adapt to that and make it so that we're still being safe, right? So I think it's a good thing that there's this pushback, and I like to see that from Blue Origin. I think they need to get their launch cadence up, and with New Glenn, they've got a little bit of work to get to, their original 45-ton payload capacity. Right now they're at 25 metric tons, which is totally fine. First maiden launch, you're not going to push the hardware to its absolute limits. But the quickest way to get there and the most financially viable and the fastest progress technology-wise is to fly as much as possible and keep reusing those rockets, because you don't have to build a whole rocket. You save so much in development costs that can go towards solving the problems that do come up and then tuning everything. So as an engineer, this kind of stuff excites me. This is the good stuff, right? That gets you excited about the work that you're doing and the challenge that you're attempting. And as I'm 34 now, I'm going to be 35 soon, and having worked in engineering long enough now, it really does come down to what excites you, and you should if you can combine that with something that you get paid for, then that's like a beautiful combination. And I think for me, that's why I went to school for aerospace engineering. That's why I like space. I like a good challenge. And so what Blue Origin has ahead of them is a huge challenge. And with Artemis program being looked at again, we can go to the whole history of it, but Artemis and the Space Launch System rocket, there's a very high likelihood that there becomes a new contract available to send Artemis to the moon. And if Blue Origin gets their New Glenn rocket ready, they could very well take that away from SpaceX. So very exciting times as far as rockets and engineering and technology in space, but we're excited for Blue Origin's launch. They could launch before the end of the year. That's what they're posturing for. That's why they're on the pad. That's why they're talking about the payload, the Blue Ring payload. It's all good. And so I hope that they are able to launch well before the end of the year, maybe even before the holidays. That way everyone can enjoy their holidays. But these people will continue to work through the holidays and throughout the rest of the year to get this to go. And we wish them luck, and we thank them for how hard they're working and how many hours and forming their entire life around this mission. We appreciate you. So good luck, Team Blue, and let's get this new heavy lift reusable rocket up in the air and into orbit.